Hey everyone, David here with your weekly Mouthful of David video. Like always, we'll start with the updates first. So there aren't really any new updates since last week, but just to kind of catch everyone up, in case you didn't see last week's video, or you just, could use a reminder, we are now releasing each of our episodes in segments, in mostly like 2 or 3 parts, but, it'll depend on the length of the episode and everything. So the current one that we're in the process of releasing right now is about the First Indochina War, which was the war for Vietnamese independence against the French after World War II. So that will, the first part's already out. The second part will be coming out, I believe, this upcoming weekend, and then the third part will be out soon thereafter. We're also going to be recording an episode about Lenin. That'll be the next one. And then after that, it's my turn to pick, and so I'm probably going to go with some heavyweight boxing history, actually. I'll be doing the trifecta of Floyd Patterson, Sonny Liston, and the man himself, Muhammad Ali, because they have a really interesting historical dynamic, and I'll talk about it, in the podcast and stuff, so I won't go into depth here, but they connect to some bigger historical forces beyond just the world of boxing, and that's what I find really interesting about them. So, to expect all of that, throughout the next couple months, and we'll just keep recording, keep making new content. But with that out of the way, some of you have no idea who I'm about to talk about briefly, but this video won't be about him, but just real briefly, Michael Brooks, an independent media figure whom I really liked and respected, passed away the other day. He was really young. He was something like 37, I believe, and it just kind of came out of nowhere. It doesn't seem to be COVID related, but he was just an independent media figure who everyone liked and respected, I mean, there are a lot of independent media figures that I somewhat follow, in the sense that, I'll listen to some of their stuff, but there's no, like, one source that I listen to above all else or anything, but I listen to a few of them, and even those that don't like each other were all in unison, just talking about how great Michael Brooks was to them, how much he just cared about what he did, and, how much he just really tried to use his platform, to inform people and challenge them to think. And, that's something I really respect. That's something that I hope we're able to do with this podcast. And, the world is just a little worse off for him not being here. But we can, try to make sure that we are, carrying on his ideas in whatever way we can. So with that being said, my video this week will be about the role of independent media in history, or the relationship, I guess you could say, between them. Because there are kind of 2 main things that mark the relationship between them. But I'll talk about that after I actually identify what I mean by independent media. So just using the Wikipedia definition, independent media is media that is free of direct influence from government or corporate interests. So it's basically media where, the people that are, sharing their perspective and just talking about events of the day or whatever, are able to give an honest perspective, and they're not really being pressured through any government or corporate, pressures to talk about something in a certain way or to not talk about something. And it's very good to just generally follow independent media in general, but the thing about the relationship that history has with media in general is, again, twofold. One is, when media is covering a certain event, that coverage will be used in writing the history books of tomorrow. And so when you have non-independent media, whether it is state-run or, just bogged down in corporate sponsorships, you really get a limiting perspective, because those forces, of course, by definition, do not want anything that's going to really make them look bad. And so the beautiful thing about independent media in drawing from it to shape history is you can get more honest perspectives on things that you couldn't get with non-independent media. So just to, come up with a hypothetical example, if you had a history of Latin America that was, put together entirely by media where Coca-Cola was a sponsor of that media, you probably wouldn't hear about the times rather, that Coca-Cola hired death squads to assassinate union leaders that were trying to unionize Coca-Cola workers in Latin America, which is something they've repeatedly done. That is omitting historical fact. And so, having independent media can help shed light on things in a way that non-independent media can't, and it can therefore guarantee a more honest record of history, right? And that's one thing. But the other big thing is they can also talk about the past and talk about history with the same lack of blinders on, right? And so, going back to Michael Brooks real quick, I would encourage people to go to YouTube and just search like Michael Brooks history to see him talk about history, or, Michael Brooks. Matt Chrisman is a guest on there sometimes who I really like and whose perspective of history that I really like. But point being, it can serve both to make the history of tomorrow, but also to kind of review the history of the past. Because, most media, whether independent or not, will occasionally do like history projects or episodes covering history or, articles or whatever. And sometimes something that frustrates me is that when a certain media outlet does do a project about history, or even, again, just like a video or an article or something, it can leave out a lot of really important context. And I don't even necessarily always chalk this up to nefarious influences or anything like that, because another problem with the profit-driven media industry of today isn't just what sponsors tell you what you can and can't say, but also that you're trying to generate as many clicks as possible, and in doing so, you're going to try to be short, brief, and to the point. You're also going to try to stir shit sometimes, just doing whatever you can to make people want to click your links, right? Sometimes even if it's just a hate click, whatever drives traffic. And so another thing that I appreciate about independent media, again, whether it's talking about history of the past, or being used to create history in the future, is that it can sometimes go into more depth and talk about things with more nuance, because they have their own, independently built audience that might be coming to, that platform because they appreciate the extra thoughtfulness that's put into their coverage of things. Sometimes I'll see an article about like the refugee crisis at the border, and it doesn't talk about like the full history of like why a lot of these refugees are coming over. And I think that, that's to the detriment of us understanding all these things. So just again, overall, independent media is really important because it can help give us more perspective on the past by covering the past in a less limited way. And it can also be used to help forge a more accurate history for the future. So thank you for listening, everyone. If you haven't already, be sure to like us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. We have a YouTube channel as well, so check us out there. In the meantime, stay safe, have a great week, and catch y'all around.